Welcome to Build Weekend Watch. It's our last episode of 2018, which means we made it. We are alive. Woo! And if that's the case, then I guess I have to adjust my expectations, the ones I had at the beginning of the year. And maybe Trump's a good president? I don't know. Does it mean we're in some kind of bizarro world and life itself is the best movie of the year? Nah. Anyway, both those things are horrible. And right now, joining me for this monumental episode, we have Buzzfeed's critic and culture writer, Alison Willmore, and Yahoo Entertainment senior writer, Ethan Alter. Give them another round of applause. Okay, so the way we're gonna do this today for the best movies of the year, each of us have 3 picks, and it's gonna be a lightning round. No, it's not gonna be a lightning round. And we're just gonna go down the list, and we're gonna say what your pick is. We're gonna roll a trailer, and then we're gonna talk about that pick. And I believe the first person on our list of picks is you. It is your 3rd pick for the best movie of the year. What is that movie? And then after you say the name of the movie, say, roll the trailer.
Okay, now I'm like hoping I get these in the right order. I believe my number...
So too.
I hope so too. This would be embarrassing. I believe my number 3 pick is A Star Is Born.
Ooh.
Roll trailer.
Very good.
Can we sing that?
Wait, roll the trailer, yeah. Number 3, what do you love about A Star Is Born?
Well, Bradley Cooper's beard, obviously. We were just talking about that. He should always have a beard. He looks so good with the beard. And, you know, just Brad, if you're listening. I just think that it's like a big kind of like romantic... like the kind of movie, I mean, it's obviously a remake of something that's been remade now multiple times over the years, but like, it feels like the type of movie that people don't make anymore, you know, like this big sweeping studio picture that's, I found like super romantic, sad, I love the music. Going into this, my expectations were like non-existent. I had no idea. It could have gone any way, and I was just so swept up in it.
Did you see it at one of the first screenings of it?
I saw it at the Toronto Film Festival.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a pretty early screening, and I was just like...
Had there been much hype yet?
I think that it was at the Venice Film Festival, which is like a kind of fancy, like, you know, very kind of like art film place to premiere a movie like this, and it went over really well there too. So.
It is. I mean, it's a beautiful film. I think on my 10 list, it's somewhere on there. But it's a fascinating movie in the sense that we don't get movies like this anymore. If a sweeping Hollywood human story like this would have to have a fight scene, right? There'd have to be some sort of like rope swinging ninja fight.
There is like
scene.
A punch, you know, Sam Elliott, you know, don't punch him, don't punch him. Yeah, but I think like the fact that this succeeded and also Crazy Rich Asians did was like a kind of nice reminder that like, you know,
people also just like movies.
Yes, people like movies. There's space for romance, like in the kind of big studio, you know, world. We're not just all franchises. There is kind of more space for movies like this.
Can I ask, does the last hour of the movie work for you as well as the first hour?
I mean, definitely the first hour is like better. I think there's no arguing that. Though that's kind of built into the story too. When you have, you know, this rise and fall. Yeah, the second half is not. I think that it still, I think, really works just because I think their relationship is kind of like interesting and complicated and tender. And I like that it really is like, you know, there is no easy answer to dating someone who's dealing with addiction. There's no kind of easy solve. And I thought it was like pretty sensitive in dealing with that.
Yeah. One of the things I was just going to say that I really like about it, speaking to the fact that it has been remade so many times, I thought it did a nice job honoring, in its own way, the Judy Garland version, which is a full-fledged musical. And this does a nice job sort of tracing the musical's origins, or the roots of that in the way it frames all the concert numbers, which are done all on the stage from the perspective of the performers, gives you that intimacy that helps you connect emotionally to Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, but also recreates the experience of watching a musical where you're always on stage with the performers, too. And I thought that was without making it a conventional musical, it still functions that way. It pays homage to what came before. So
yeah, I found that the last hour, while I started having issues with some of the narrative strands in the last hour, it didn't matter. I was still sort of so swept up in the fact that this movie got all the money in the world to make it, and it looks so great. His cinematography is beautiful, the performances are great, and the music is great. So even when I was kind of like, I don't know about, that doesn't seem right, the way that he's responding to her SNL performance, I still really enjoyed it. But speaking of the SNL performance, why do you do that to me? What are your thoughts
Is it?
thoughts
You
on
mean
that?
like, is it a bop or is it a bad song?
Right, yeah.
I think it's a bop, honestly. I
thought it was a good song.
Thank you.
I heard it and I was like, not a bad song. And then he made fun of her about it and I was like, what do you care? Why are you making fun of her for making a pop song?
I think it's fair to say that the movie is like not on his side at that point.
Right.
Also, like I think it's kind of like, yeah, maybe rock dude, you got to step back.
Right, exactly. Maybe you're not. It's time to let the old ways die, as he says. So he's one of those
there
old
it
ways. There you go. It's all. That's the theme. It's the theme.
On that note, let's talk about your pick for number 3 of the year. What do you got?
Absolutely. I got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which yes, exactly. It's been a
so good.
great year for comic book movies, and I think this is the best of them. So let's roll the trailer.
Roll that trailer.
Yes,
no, that's
there we
okay.
go.
We can do it at the same time.
We need to get back to our universes soon.
Brooklyn is gonna collapse. My family lives in Brooklyn. Whoa.
Miles, what's wrong?
This was never your city. It's mine.
If I don't destroy the collider, none of us will have a home to go home to.
Remember, what makes you different
Let's go.
is what makes you Spider-Man.
So, talking about letting the old ways die, let's talk about Into the Spider-Verse.
It's, well, in a way, 2018 has been a big year for letting the old ways of comic book movies die. I think you put this on your top 10 list on BuzzFeed.
I did, yeah.
And I liked how you connected that Black Panther began the year, and now we're ending the year with Spider-Verse. And it changes the types of people we get to see as heroes. And I would include, actually, Aquaman in that category as well. I think that movie is like the big, dumb, older cousin to these two movies. But I really enjoy it, and I think one of the things I like about it is that embraces Jason Momoa's biracial identity in the movie, and then Black Panther, you had T'Challa, obviously, and then you have Miles Morales here. I love that in 2018, kids can go to comic book movies and see these people behind the masks. I think that these characters behind the masks, I think that's wonderful. And then just as an animated film, it's wonderful. I think 25 years ago, the best Batman movie came out called Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, which is based on the Batman animated series. And I think it's great to see Spider-Man making a similar leap into this day and age in terms of what they can do with animation. So it's a really fantastic film.
And this was on your list as well?
It was. And the animation just really blew my mind. Like, it's so beautiful and it's so, like, innovative in just terms of, like, how it evokes comic books, in, like, putting, like, the words on screen, in breaking the screen up with, like, panels, in having, like, the dots, on people as texture sometimes. I just thought that, like, it really showed what animation can do that nothing else can, in ways that, when sometimes you're like, oh, computer generated images make it seem like everything is possible, and yet at the same time, sometimes everything can look a bit the same. Like, watching this movie, I was just like, I have not seen anything like this before.
And it's another example of Phil Lord and Chris Miller taking low expectations and just sort of completely blowing them out of the water. I know there's 3 other directors that are on this film they are not the directors, they're the producers, but every time they're involved with a project, whether it was 21 Jump Street or the Lego movie, I go into it being like, okay, another Spider-Man thing or a Lego movie, okay, and then you're like, oh, that's the best thing ever made. How did they do that? Like, I only have higher expectations for the next thing that to do, but they'll choose a project that'll give me low expectations again. I loved this film as well. I think it's one of the best animated movies I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's also, it kind of in a neat way, is it takes away the whole idea of so many kind of like superhero origin stories where it's like, you are the special one, like you are the most special. And this one's very much like, anyone can wear the mask, It is very much like, there's room for all kinds of stories, but also like the point of this is like your desire to do good, which, I kind of appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to jump into my third pick. It's actually a tie, which I didn't tell you guys you could do. I'm sorry. I totally
wow,
cheated.
boo.
My show. I'll do what I want. My show. I'm going to go full wrestling with this one. My show. It's a tie between Leave No Trace and Lean on Pete. 2 very upbeat movies that'll keep you laughing into next week. Let's take a look at the trailers.
Listen, kid, things are changing.
What do you mean?
I'm selling him. He's not a pet. It's just a horse.
I'll buy him.
What? With what money? And where are you going to keep him? Not in my stalls.
Come on, Pete.
Did you even try? 'Cause I can't tell.
Somebody said it's unspeakable love to me.
Where's your home?
With my dad. I don't want to leave. Same thing that's wrong with you isn't wrong with me.
So I chose these movies together. It felt like they could kind of be put together, even though no one is talking about Lean on Pete at the end of this year, which really bums me out. I think it's an incredibly strong film by one of the best storytellers really working right now, and it's a movie that is anytime you feel like it's going to get sentimental or schmaltzy, it pulls back, and anytime you think it's going to get too harsh and too gritty, it adds a little bit of emotion to it. It's a really beautiful film, but I put these two together because they're both about people on the edges, on the fringes of society, people that are rarely focused on when it comes to movies, and people that we don't talk about. They're two different types of characters, both recovering or sort of trying to live through trauma, and the only way that they can do that is to sort of be away from everybody in their lives. They are not the easiest watches of films. Both can be quite morose and sad, but they also find moments that makes the beauty that they have in them all the more powerful and striking at times. Yeah, have you guys seen these movies?
Mm-hmm. I have seen them. Yeah.
Any fans?
I think Lean on Pete was not my favorite sad horse movie of the year. There were multiple sad horse movies this year.
Favorite sad horse movie?
It's on my list, in fact.
Oh, got it.
Buzzfeed.
We may be talking about it later.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Tune in later to find out her favorite sad horse movie.
Yeah,
no spoilers.
Keep watching. Don't tune in later. Don't leave.
What are you doing, man?
Your show.
My show.
But yeah, I think Deborah Granick is a great filmmaker, and I think she has this way of discovering talent. She didn't pluck Jennifer Lawrence out of nowhere, but she, previously, but she definitely, I think, launched her into movie stardom. And I think the lead in this one, Thomasin McKenzie, is so good and is such a discovery.
And Ben Foster is as well. And one of the things that I've liked Ben Foster before, but I also find he can be a little too affected in his performances and be a bit showy. And what I liked about this is that it took away all of that, it stripped all of that energy that he has and just made him go inward with the performance. And it's a great performance.
It's interesting. I had a little bit of a complicated reaction to Leave No Trace, and this is a safe space, so maybe we can all work through it together. But I preface it by saying I thought the performances were great, and I thought the direction was really great. But I did find myself the whole movie just wondering what would have happened to this father and daughter if they were African American or if they were Hispanic. How would they have been received differently by the bureaucracy? How would they have been received differently by the camp they're eventually accepted into at the end? And the reason that was sort of upmost in my mind is I saw Leave No Trace right after I saw Wild Wild Country. And this takes place in Oregon. That documentary series did not make Oregon look particularly tolerant. And doing some reading after watching that documentary, you learn about the sort of the state's complicated history with race and how it still continues. How Portland is one of the whitest cities in America, I think. And so I just found myself distracted by that a little bit. And I don't think it's the movie's fault. I don't think it was Granick's responsibility to have to necessarily acknowledge that. But it did impact my viewing of it. It was just in my mind, and I really had to ask myself that question: what would the story have looked like had these characters been different? And
the Pacific Northwest is also a huge home to neo-Nazi tribes all across, and he is a soldier in this film recovering with PTSD, and he does find this sort of off-the-grid community. And while, I think the racial politics of the people who live there are not necessarily explored, probably for the better of this story, that stuff is definitely there and is sort of left off the table, not talked about. Alison, what is your number 2 pick of the year 2018? Do it.
It's The Favorites. Yes, the funniest kind of period movie of the year.
Of all time, maybe?
Maybe
Funniest
of
period
all
movie
time.
of all time?
It's so funny. But let's see the trailer.
Nice.
You're so beautiful. Stop it, you mock me. If I were a man, I would ravish you.
You have become close to Abigail.
She is a viper. You're jealous.
You must send Abigail away.
I do not want to.
Let's shoot something. Sometimes it is hard to remember whether you have loaded the pellet or not.
I must take control of my circumstance.
Throw! I'm on my side. Always.
The favorite rule, so hard.
It's so good. I've always been a fan of Yorgos Lanthimos, the director. He made The Lobster. He made Dogtooth. He has this particular this like extremely deadpan, extremely weird sense of humor. And I think this one's a little different. At the same time, it also feels so much like his kind of movie where everything is just like off kilter. And I just loved the interaction between the three leads. You know, you have this power struggle as kind of like lesbian love triangle, as kind of like history lesson in a weird way. It's actually, a lot of it is like very historically accurate. And three of my favorite performances of the year, you know, Rachel Weisz, Emma Stone, Olivia Colman, who's so funny as the queen.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Your number 3 was Star is Born, Lady Gaga. Your number 2 is The Favorite. Do you think Olivia Colman could take the Best Actress Oscar over Lady Gaga?
I mean, I think my one hesitation there is that I feel like calling her the lead of this movie feels a little bit like a fudge. Yeah, I don't know that, it feels like choosing a lead of this movie is a little unfair. I think it's like pretty evenly shared between all three women. I think she's fantastic, and I would not be sad if she did, but I can see kind of grumblings about whether she's actually the lead of the movie affecting it.
I mean, maybe the two greatest moments in movies this year were Lady Gaga singing The Shallows and Olivia Colman barfing and eating cake at the same time.
I think about the scene where she eats cake all the time. I think like the thing that really makes it is not just that she's like playing solitaire and eating cake, but also that there's like an attendant waiting in the corner with this bowl ready for her to vomit and like rushes over so that she can vomit, pause for a moment, and then keep eating cake. It's like one of the funniest bits of physical comedy I can think of this year.
Also, great movie for rabbit fans. Just rabbits all over the place.
Yeah, rabbits, lots of rabbits.
Yeah, exactly. You could learn a
big
lot.
rabbit protector too.
Right.
Yeah. Ethan, your thoughts on The Favorite?
It's funny. I tend to be a fan of exactly half of Yorgos' movies. I find myself always liking like one half and then the next half not so much. And so in this case, I like the first half more than the second half, which is sort of how I fell on The Lobster and Dogtooth as well. Sacred Deer was a case where I liked the second half more than the first half. But there's something midway through I lost the thread somehow. And I do want to go back and watch it again to sort of pinpoint what exactly went off the rails for me. I think I liked the machinations of Emma Stone's character before she attains her position of power as opposed to holding on to that power. I think at a certain point, the movie hits a wall once it's about maintaining the power as opposed to getting up to that position. So that's just something. But I do want to see it again. I loved Olivia Colman, and she's great. And the performances in general are great. It's just that weird thing with me with him. I can never seem to like a whole movie of him. I'm waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you on that. I mean, this and The Killing of a Sacred Deer were the two movies that I ended up liking a whole movie. Yep. Both Dogtooth and The Lobster. The Lobster I thought was 3 movies that was sort of slapped into one. Sure. And I was like, you just don't want to write a second act. Right. You just keep writing a first act over and over again. Ethan, let's talk about your number 2 pick. It's fascinating surprise pick. I love it.
Yes, no, it's Shirkers, which is a great documentary on Netflix now. It's by Sandy Tan, who it's about her own life as a film-crazed teenager in Singapore in the early 90s. She made a movie called Shirkers. That movie was then lost, and this is a documentary about how she found it again, essentially. Trailer.
George is my new best friend. A man of unplaceable age and origin. After shooting Rat, he took everything. George was gone, and so was Shirkers.
George had this perverse need to create mythology.
This is such I mean, even though everyone tells you that it's great before you sit down to watch it, I think like Minding the Gap, another documentary on a streaming network, no matter how much anyone tells you how great it is, there's something about watching the layers of it sort of unpeel and realizing how beautiful and well told the story is as you're watching. Anyway, it's your pick. You take over.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's your show, though. No, I mean, it's been such a great year for documentaries in general, so there are a lot I could have picked for this slot, but I think Shirkers I really respond to because just the personal connection. I grew up, I'm a diplomat brat. My dad was a Foreign Service officer, so I grew up overseas, and I actually lived in Hong Kong in the early 90s, around the same time all this was happening in Singapore, and her descriptions of being a film lover in love with what was happening in American cinema, indie cinema from abroad rings so true to me. I just remember that experience of running down to the video store, hoping that I'd find the title come in, or hoping it would show up at one of Hong Kong's only art houses and being able to see something there.
What were some of your favorite titles then when you were, like what titles do you hold on to from that time?
I love seeing like Water for Chocolate in the Hong Kong art house. Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was in the art house there, not in the big cinemas, and it was amazing watching that there. I saw it 2 or 3 times. It was so much fun to watch that with that audience there. But it just captures that experience of being a film lover and obsessed with the cinema that's abroad from you that you don't have a direct access to. And I also made my own movies in high school. They're nowhere near as accomplished as her. Like I would never. They deserve to be lost. Let's just put it that way.
I'll say, I wasn't raised overseas, but growing up in a small town and loving indie film and art film as well in the 90s and being obsessed with it, there was a teacher that befriended me and like, this is a good story, and would show me and would tell me other movies that I could go watch, would help me make my own little movies. And it is something that, like, if you grew up like that, immediately you relate to her and have a nostalgia for it. Because if you were in a small town or a foreign country, oftentimes you did feel like the only one who was desperate to talk about Jim Jarmusch with somebody. Right. Everyone would be like, who? And you'd be like, come on, Down by Earth, guys.
I like that it shows that there was such a small filmmaking scene in Singapore at the time that, like, in losing this movie, it actually kind of like hurt the growth of a scene, And I think that the ways in which it shows what it's like to kind of try and form a community of like-minded people when you feel relatively isolated from the things you love, like from American indie cinema, I thought it was like very kind of like rich and interesting when it dealt with that.
Yeah, it was amazing to see how small that scene was, and that if whatever she made, she would have been like a heralded filmmaker, and like, God,
a huge deal.
To have grown up like that would have been amazing. I would have made a movie already.
Yeah, no, man, I was just waiting. When I made my high school movies, I was waiting for all the acclaim to roll, and it just never did. So clearly, I picked the wrong subject. But it's also a great story, I think, about sort of a filmmaker who loses a story they've told and what it's like to then see it again, and not necessarily in the form she wanted, because when she gets it back, the audio is all missing. So she has to she's watching these images of the past without the sound there. So she's reconstituting it and turning it into something new. It's really
reclaims the story that she lost.
Exactly.
Yeah. My number 2 pick is, well, I'll just say it. It is my Roma, but it is not Roma. Everybody this year loves Roma. I love this movie, and I kind of think it's better. Let's take a look at the trailer.
A ja chłopca chap za szyję, będę kochać póki żyję, będę kochać póki żyję.
So that is Paweł Pawlikowski's Cold War. I bring up Roma not just because they're in black and white, but because they're both deeply personal films. They're kind of somewhat slow-moving films, and both of them, critics have said that they are innovative in the way that they use cinematography. And to be honest, I found this film to be far more innovative in the way that it used cinematography and more striking. I found Roma is great. I don't mean to knock Roma, but I'm just surprised that this hasn't gotten as much love and admiration as Roma has. This is the story of a couple who meet in Poland in I believe the 50s, and their relationship spans over about 20 or 30 years as he lives in Paris and then they live somewhere else. And it's actually the story apparently of Paweł Pawlikowski's parents. I don't know how much of it is the story of his parents.
Yeah, I'm assuming the ending is not the story of his parents.
It's a tragic ending, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry. But it is haunting and beautiful, and I've never seen a movie that looked like it. I was sitting in the front row in a screening room, and the way that he uses lighting and the way that he layers the characters in the frame, it felt like I was looking at a 3D movie at times. I felt like I was really inside the images, and the performances are really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be really difficult to tell a dysfunctional love story because there's usually a point where you're like, guys, come on. Get it together or just call it quits. But I think that this movie makes such a kind of compelling case for why these two people just can't stay away from each other, while at the same time they just have this like incredible chemistry. Yeah. Right. But it's this like really kind of like jagged chemistry where they're just as prone to kind of like hurt each other.
Well, what's so fascinating about that is it never really gives you a moment where they say to each other, I just can't quit you, or like I can't leave you. It's all about the actual chemistry that they bring together on screen, and it's hard not to buy that, but if you don't buy that, no one is going to tell you that why they're together or why they keep coming back to each other. Yeah. It's just about looking at them be sexy together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do that very well, though.
Very well, right?
It's sort of the anti-Roma too, in that it does all this. It spans so many years. It tells so much. It communicates so much emotion in only 90 minutes. I think the brevity of it is something that movies could learn a lot from, because I don't think it sacrifices nuance or again emotion for it, but it's just very concise. And I think there's conciseness is something that's increasingly missing, even from the movies I love that ramble on forever. It's nice to see something that's so perfectly judged that way.
And in that sense, there's something modest about it, right? It doesn't feel like another. Not to knock Roma. Roma is an amazing.
Roma's great.
film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Film Twitter is going to be after
being
us.
like Roma's bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a tweet from Coron or something. That's not true. He doesn't care. But it feels a bit more modest, and I think that's one thing that is missing sometimes in film criticism. We just love directors who have do something really showy and succeed even partially at it. Whereas this is it's 89 minutes, I think, and it's a small film with a huge sweeping themes, and it's really beautiful. Anyway, Alison. I think it's time for your number one pick. Should I do like a drum roll?
I feel like this answer is like not a good one to kind of be like, what's it gonna be?
Or horse hooves.
You think a number, I know what it is. You think a number that people in the audience can go, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Sorry, guys, if that's the case. We did say big year for skateboarding movies, big year for sad horse movies. I think this would be a sad horse movie. It's The Rider is my number one. Let's see the trailer.
Sometimes dreams aren't meant to be.
I believe God gives each of us a purpose. To the horse that's trying to cross the prairie.
Go, man.
For a cowboy, it's to ride.
Number one, everyone loves this movie.
Yeah, I've seen it 3 times. I like sob at the end every time. It's disgusting. It's this is like a movie that takes place in the Badlands of South Dakota. It actually takes place on a reservation, though that's never mentioned. All the main characters are Native American. But it's about a guy who's a rodeo rider, who at the start of the film has had like this really horrifying head injury, and he's trying to deal with the fact that he probably can't do this again without really like dying maybe, but like it's his whole life revolves around it. And it becomes about both like about his whole life and like working with animals, but also about the idea like when something is so key to your identity, how you come around to letting go of it or maybe not. And all of the cast are kind of playing fictionalized versions of themselves. And the director, Chloe Zhao, who's actually Chinese and is going to direct a Marvel movie next, which is hard for me to wrap my head around.
Really?
Because,
What Marvel movie?
I think it's The Eternals.
The Eternals.
Right.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, but
Cosmic.
Comic books. I don't remember.
There's a lot, I know. But like, she's so good at working with people who are not professional actors and just gets these incredible, like tender, wonderful performances out of them.
Oh, wouldn't it be kind of cool if Marvel made a non-professional actor movie
Yeah, exactly.
and she directed it, and it was like limited special effects, and it was like this.
I would honestly love that so much.
Like an origin story without any of the action or special effects.
Yeah, it's just and it's out in a like rural place and it's someone discovering powers in a really unconventional way. I would love that. A rural Marvel movie.
With her and Marvel when they brought Chloe in, they were like, "We want you to do The Rider, but with a superhero."
Yeah, just like a melancholy, kind of deliberately paced movie, but superpowers.
We want to confuse our base now.
Right. We're just gonna not give them nothing. I like The Rider a lot too. I think it's in my top 5 of the year. It's just what I love about it too is the way it tells a story that looks like it's going to go in one way in terms of how he deals with the fact that he can't have the way of life that he's wanted, and there's a potential tragic ending that's baked into that premise. And I like that she avoids that ending. She takes it to someplace much more interesting. I think mature for both the sort of because it's also a modern day Western in a lot of ways. And I think it's very mature for both being in that way of how it plays off of Western archetypes, but also in the way it deals with one person's experience when they can't do the thing they've always wanted to do, and how do they react to that.
What would be your injury for that, Ethan?
My injury for that is
like get your eyes gouged out and you can't watch movies anymore.
Exactly. If they just fell out one day and just I can't.
You're like Bjork and Dancer in the Dark, but it's about movies. Okay, Ethan, what's your number 2?
You mean number 1?
Oh, number 1.
Excuse number 2 already. Yeah.
So bad at my job.
No, but number 1, I love this movie so much. It's Sorry to Bother You. And I won't say anything about it. Let's just roll the trailer.
You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
My white voice.
Like this young blood.
Hey, Mr. Kramer. This is Langston from Regal View.
Was that Visa or MasterCard?
We go level it up! You're going upstairs, my compadre.
Okay, bravo.
You
don't have to sell out. I'm not selling out.
Here's the starting salary. Well, man, I'm gonna have to get me some new suits.
Can I just say before you get started, what I love about our lists so far is that they're personal lists. These aren't like what we think are objectively the best movies of the year. These are the movies that resonated the most with us. And I think Sorry to Bother You is a great number one because there's lots of arguments for like flaws in the movies or plot holes or something, but it's a movie that you love, and it is a wonderful film.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just watching it again last night, and the reason I loved it so much and why it's so high is just it's the closest I've gotten to sort of experiencing being John Malkovich for the first time again since seeing that movie 20 years ago. It has the same sort and there's a lot of Spike Jonze in it, there's a lot of Robert Downey Sr. in it, there's a lot of other early Spike Lee in it, but it's also its own unique thing, and I think it's one of those great comedies that takes an absurd premise, and the genius of it is the way it sort of finds the way to keep ratcheting up the absurdity, but also at the same time deepening the resonance and always being consistent with the ideas. I think you could maybe point to plot holes and things, but I think it's really well thought out all the way through. It has an arc that it follows, and it's a really satisfying, hilarious arc. I just love it.
And it's also why point to some of the minor plot holes in a movie like this, because it's like already an incredibly hard movie to put together, to imagine, and to follow through on, and the fact that they did it and it's as successful as it is makes it a massive achievement. Yeah.
And I also appreciate that it's just like such a kind of anti-capitalist movie. Like this and Support the Girls are the two kind of like quietly super anti-capitalist in a really kind of like engaging, like human way. And I was surprisingly in the mood for that this year.
Support the Girls almost made my list. It's such a wonderful
It's really
movie.
good. Yeah.
Okay, so should we do my number one? Should I just do it?
I guess we
I'll
should,
do my number one. Okay. In my mind, in my estimation, I think it's the only narrative film this year that attempted to grapple with the sort of absolute the biggest issue of our lives right now, which is climate catastrophe. I don't know, guys, if you're into this. Let's take a look at the trailer.
These kids, they want certainty, don't think, follow. They fall prey to extremism. It's a world without hope.
No, I have not lost my faith.
You think that what we did together was a sin?
I've seen enough real sin to know the difference.
You didn't tell the police, right?
Take a look at your own life before you criticize others.
These are frightening times. We have to be patient.
Well, somebody has to do something.
I think for me, it's the only movie that I've seen in a long time that's attempted to even talk about what it feels like to be a conscious person right now in terms of what's going on with the world, both in capitalism, both in religion, and also with the climate, and how we're all connected and we're all tied, and none of us are really doing as much as we can to protect ourselves as, it's 60 degrees on December 17th right now, whatever day it is. And Ethan Hawke's performance is amazing, and it's incredible to watch Paul Schrader make the best movie of his career at 70-something years old. He's a filmmaker who's always been a great writer, has iconic movies on his list that he's written, but as a director, he's never really made a movie as good as some of the stuff that he's written, be it Taxi Driver or Raging Bull, or I think even Last Temptation, didn't he write some of that? He's got Gigolo, and he's got a couple others, but this is the first time that you actually get to see him, it seems to me, like really become the director that he's always tried to be, in the sense that it references, talk about the culmination of a body of work, right? It's referencing the books that he's written, it's referencing the movies that he's made, the movies that he's loved, and there's also little cheeky references to Taxi Driver in it as well. I was blown away by First Reformed. I can't wait to watch it again.
Yeah, I love the way it kind of updates Taxi Driver, but also in Taxi Driver, you're like, what is going to happen? Like, what's he going to do? This guy is kind of like slowly, falling apart. And I feel like in First Reformed, you're like, he's slowly falling apart, but he's totally right. He is right to feel this way. Right. He is right to feel this panic.
Taxi Driver, Bickle's a racist monster who can't relate to anybody. In this, it's like, if you are a conscious human being, he's all of us. Right. Like, how do I make the biggest dent possible to prove to people they're doing something wrong? Is terrorism the only way? In that sense, is terrorism inherently bad? I don't know. Right. I'm not asking that question.
Answer it now.
Don't fire me, Yahoo.
No, I mean, I'm firmly on the atheist side of the spectrum, but I love that Schrader has written two of my favorite movies about religion, Last Temptation and now this one. I think the way they wrestle with belief and faith and what that means and how it can help certain people live a better life if they, or in some cases not. I love the way he wrestles with those questions as a former Calvinist, I believe, himself. It's clear he has a very very deep-seated ideas about what religion means, and the way he's able to dramatize that, I think, is really special. And I love watching his description, the depictions of that.
It's also got the cocktail of the year, like someone pours himself whiskey and then pours some Pepto-Bismol in there.
The taxi driver moment.
Yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
the moment
yeah.
with the Alka-Seltzer in the water, where instead it's Pepto-Bismol in whiskey. Yeah, it's tasty. Sounds really great.
It's also got an amazing final shot. I think Cold War and First Reformed have my two favorite final shots. I go back and forth about which one I like more, but just the final shot of this one, you can be interpreted in so many different ways. I have my favorite interpretation. I know others have theirs, but I think it's just such a beautiful metaphorical image that you can come away with. It's really great.
Yeah, and I'm going to contradict something that I said a few minutes ago about our favorite movies rather than objectively the best movies. And there has been a part of me as I've seen end of the year lists come forward where if this was missing on the list, I've been kind of like, well, what are you doing? This is the only movie that addressed us right now.
You're
this
a bad person, right?
Yeah, it's like everybody should see this movie. Everybody should be thinking about this. Everybody should be concerned with this. And then at the same time, it's also a beautifully made, somewhat I don't want to say entertaining because that sort of elicits humor, I think, but it is a wonderful watch.
It would be nice if it were almost his mic drop movie. I mean, because as you said, it's the summation of everything. I know he's already working on something else, but I can't imagine him doing a better movie than this at this point. I just, maybe he will. That'd be great. But it would also be nice if he just walked away after this. He said, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, that would be incredible. It is, like I said, the culmination of his entire career, it feels like. Okay, so those are our picks for the best. It's 9 picks, really. But some runner-ups here, if we have any. Do you have any?
I love, I know you already kind of brought it up, but Minding the Gap is an incredible documentary. You can watch it on Hulu right now. I really recommend it. It's maybe not the most immediately uplifting of watches, but I think it's there have been a few really great examinations of masculinity this year. I think The Rider is one of them, and Minding the Gap, which is about these 2 guys, and then the filmmaker kind of becomes a third subject about kind of growing up in this Rust Belt city in Illinois. It's just so wonderful, and kind of the idea of not growing up to be like the men who raised you, who in this case were all abusive.
Ethan?
No, I like Minding the Gap a lot. My favorite of this year's skateboard trilogy was Skate Kitchen, which I really like. That's a really nice. It shows you a different group of skaters than we usually get. It's skater girls instead of skater boys. It also is about, for me, it recaptures. Speaking to personal feelings and personal favorites, it captures that time as a teenager where you find your tribe for the first time and how just wonderful that rush feels when you find that, and then the awfulness that happens when it all falls apart because of petty bullshit that won't matter, in 20 years. But
my favorite skateboarding movie of the year was mid-90s, JK.
Yeah. Best Lucas Hedges performance, though. I will say that. I think Lucas Hedges' best performance is still mid-90s.
Possibly the best Lucas Hedges movie of the year, which is an unfortunate statement.
Ooh, strong.
Oh, ouch.
Ben's
Shade on Ben's Back. Ben's Back is really good. Yeah, no, I like that film.
Mid-90s.
But I think his performance is the most interesting in mid-90s. I've never seen him play a character like that before, and I think it's a really great performance from him in a movie that has its issues otherwise. Although you could watch mid-90s as a prequel to Minding the Gap, I think. You could imagine these are who they grow up to maybe be in the future.
Struggling right now to come up with any of my runners-ups. I didn't put them in the prompter.
I think I stole one of yours.
Yeah, Minding the Gap is really, that's maybe number 4 on my list of favorite movies of the year. I just thought that was such a surprising turn of events watching that movie. Another example of you gotta watch it, and you start watching it's a skateboarding movie, and then it just slowly peels these layers back and becomes about something else. And as much as we say it's not the most uplifting movie of the year, it is a thrill to watch the movie tell its story because it's consistently unexpected and always digging deeper. I really, really love that film and Shirkers. Maybe my 2 favorite
Those are
documentaries
2.
of the year.
I would also throw in, just as runner-up, Wild Salome, the Al Pacino freak out. Oh yeah, I loved it. I love Wild Salome. It's a movie. Mainly part of it is I never thought we'd actually see it.
Even with the curveballs.
But it was shot in 2008 originally. It's about him staging a production of Salome that starred a then unknown Jessica Chastain, and he finally released this documentary. And it's this great movie about an obsessive artist who's obsessed with this one play. He's obsessed with it so much he makes a documentary, a stage production, a film version of it. And the great joke at the end is he watches it back and it's terrible. And he recognizes that it's terrible. And he realizes that for all his obsession, he couldn't find what he wanted to say about it. It's a really great twist ending, I guess. I don't know if you can see it. I honestly don't know. It got a 2-week release at the Quad. I don't know if it's ever going to be released on home video because he tends not to do that with the movies he makes. But I just love that it exists. And I love that it snuck out there. It's really something.
Also want to throw out a shout out to Burning, which is an incredible movie.
Burning.
Yeah.
Can we lump in Shoplifters with that? I know
Yeah,
it's
Shoplifters
separate
also
countries.
separate countries, but Burning, Lee Chen-dong, it's just made this like incredible. It starts off as sort of like a love triangle, and then it morphs into a thriller. Has a great Stephen Yeun performance. I would love to see him kind of sneak into the Best Supporting Actor race because I think he's just so kind of like chilling and funny in that movie. But yeah, it's also just like a great movie, and I think it's been like playing in theaters, like kind of like lingering in theaters. Yeah. So if you have a chance, I think it might still be in some New York ones. It's worth checking out.
Shoplifters is a Japanese film about a group of sort of an impoverished family of shoplifters who take in at-risk children illegally from their neighborhood and raise them. It's another film that it starts in a beautiful way, and it's warm and loving, but you know right from the setup that it cannot end well, and it doesn't, and it's still a really wonderful, beautiful film to watch. I'm going to throw you guys a curveball really fast.
Oh, okay.
Most overrated movie of the year for you. Something that everyone hyped up, told you was going to be great, maybe still says is great, but you walked out and were like, I don't really get that one.
What if I say Roma?
Done. I love it.
I mean, I think Roma is like an incredibly beautiful movie. I've seen it turn up on like the #1 film of the year for a lot of people.
You cold on it? I was a little cold.
I think that his like choices he makes that are like these incredibly intricate shots are kind of distancing, which maybe is deliberate on his part, but like I think it kind of left me by the end. I felt very like outside of his main character, and there's been a lot of kind of discussion of like how much justice he does having this main character who is based on the domestic worker who like helped raise him growing up. But I think that it definitely kind of like it felt to me like it was like increasingly pushing her, further and further back in the frame, so that like the big emotional moment at the end of the movie was kind of the most distant for me.
I would agree with that. I was in that final emotional moment, I was wondering if that was the right choice rather than being wrapped up in it. Ethan?
Right. I think mine too, and maybe it's just again we sort of touched on them earlier, and while I still acknowledge them as good movies, the overwhelming praise sort of fits into that mildly overrated category, and that's Leave No Trace, which again for the reasons I cited about just really
my movie.
Do it again too, and then The Favorite is the other one. I just
sorry.
In both cases,
Wrong.
I just
That's wrong.
Wow.
I acknowledge they're good movies.
Incorrect.
They just did not hit me in that way. We've been talking about personal favorites all day, and they, in relation to the way they've been received by others, they did not hit me in that way. While I still admire them in other ways.
I'm going to say Hereditary.
Oh yes, actually no, Hereditary too. Thank
Hereditary's
you.
so good.
I raised my other answer. I raised my other
was
answer.
Something I saw twice. The first time I saw it, I thought that I really liked it. I kind of bought into everything, but I remember still feeling like I don't know, like there was some stuff that I just wasn't on board with, and then when I watched it a second time, I was really not on board with.
I like that answer more.
The thing that happens like in the first third of the movie is still, I think, one of the most scarring things I've ever seen.
Oh, I wouldn't disagree with you on that, but when the film becomes more of a horror movie, it completely loses itself. It almost wants to be a drama, and then it becomes this horror movie, and there's very little reasoning for most of the horror that ends up happening, and there isn't any logic, and so none of it is. I didn't find any of it scary. I would go, oh, cool, she's in the thing. That's cool. But
can we talk about how bad Gabriel Byrne is in the movie too? I think it's a legitimately terrible
how
performance.
little he has to do.
Yeah,
he's really bad in it.
He's the dad. He's the one who's like, maybe everything's fine, and everyone's just kind of like off their meds, and then I'm like, no, maybe there's something scary happening.
Yeah, no, I was disappointed by that one.
Guys, thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Happy 2018 ending, the longest year ever, it feels like, right? Not in movies. A lot of great movies this year, though. Thanks so much for being here, you guys. If you haven't seen any of the movies we talked about, you probably don't like movies, and if that's the case, I'm not sure why you watched all of this. See you next year. Happy holidays. Bye.